Hello and welcome to Let's Break Bread. I'm Stance, your host, inviting you into a wide-ranging conversation where we untangle everything we thought we knew about bodies, food, and eating disorder recovery. In conversation with guests from all corners of the anti-diet world, we'll dig into what it means to inhabit a body and defend it against a culture obsessed with so-called health and wellness. Whether you're in active ed recovery, tired of chasing hollow, unattainable standards, or just want to hear more about falling in love with life in the body you have now, this podcast is for you.
Hello and welcome back to Let's Break Bread. I'm your host, Stance. We are here for week 2 with a solo podcast episode. Usually we'll have guests on, but about once a month it'll just be me. And today we're going to talk all about recovery coaching. How did I get into it? What is it? Who is it for? All the things. And the first thing that we need to establish is that coaching is a little bit of the wild, wild west. There are no governing bodies of coaches. So unlike therapists, dietitians, doctors, things like that, there are governing boards that have guidelines for how these professionals need to operate. For coaching, there is no such thing. So all coaches do what they want to do. So when I talk about recovery coaching, I'll be speaking about what type of coaching I do. And if I refer you to any type of coach, what they will do, because we all operate on the same guidelines. So let's talk about how I got into eating disorder recovery coaching and then kind of dive into what it is. To begin, last week, we talked all about my own eating disorder recovery and the things that were challenging, the things that worked well, what things I wish I had in place. And in general, I wish I had a coach. The things that were missing for me was being my own person, being seen as an individual. Eating disorder treatment can be really one size fits all and a very black and white approach, and I really needed a human approach. So if there were coaches back in the day when I went to treatment, it would have been really, really helpful for me to have a coach on my team. Unfortunately, that did not exist then, but a huge reason that I do what I do now is because it's what I wish I had when I went to treatment all those years ago. I had been talking about my eating disorder recovery journey publicly on social media pretty much from the beginning. I remember posting with the girls in treatment that we were there that day. Like, I posted in real time the entire time my journey with ED recovery and body image. And so I was really living in a world where a lot of people were talking about eating disorder recovery, but I still didn't really feel like the treatment options that were out there were a good fit for me. I was already in recovery. I would now describe it as sort of pseudo recovery, but I had gotten what I could get from the eating disorder treatment clinics that I had been to, from therapists, and I started to realize that there was still a big gap. I wasn't fully recovered. I still felt like there were a lot of topics that were never discussed, and I still felt kind of trapped. In mid-2020, I found RLC. RLC stands for Recovery, Love, and Care, and it is a program started by my mentor, Jane Mattingly. She created RLC in order to have a curriculum to train coaches to be eating disorder recovery coaches. And when I found her page, I didn't really know what an eating disorder recovery coach was, but I loved what she was talking about. It felt like everything that I wish we talked about in treatment was being talked about at RLC. And so I was very intrigued as to what I could do to be a part of it. I wasn't fully bought in that I could ever be an eating disorder recovery coach, but I knew at least I wanted to know more about what they were doing and what recovery looked like in a different lens than what eating disorder treatment facilities were telling me eating disorder recovery looked like. So I signed up for her course, feeling pretty tentative about my own ability to have a business and be a coach and things like that, but I was very interested in learning more, especially for myself, and to just see like what more could recovery look like. Wow. A lot. A whole new world opened for me when I started taking that course. And that's because RLC is really big on talking about the intersectionality of eating disorders and everything else. So I never once talked about racism in eating disorder treatment, but I talked about it in RLC. I never even talked about fat phobia or ableism or anything like that in eating disorder treatment, but we talked about it in RLC. And there are some uncomfortable conversations that come up, right? Like, I am an able-bodied white woman. So it's been pretty good for me. It's hard to hear that I have a lot of privilege when it comes to eating disorder recovery, but the reality is I do. And so I'm so grateful that I've been able to challenge some of the things that I learned in treatment and further my recovery through becoming an eating disorder recovery coach. At this point in my journey, I truly wasn't sure if this was going to be a part of my career path or anything like that, but I was thrilled to be having these conversations and checking some of the things that I previously thought were true about recovery. Last week, we talked a lot about how I wasn't able to talk about being in a bigger body and my desire to lose weight. And when I found RLC, Jane was absolutely willing to have that conversation with me, and I felt very seen. So, the first step of that journey and being a part of RLC was kind of that final part of recovery for me, where I let go of my own internalized fat phobia. Not saying it never comes up, but I have really conquered that part because of RLC. I didn't conquer my own fat phobia when I was in eating disorder treatment. I wasn't allowed to talk about it. And so I went through all of eating disorder treatment with very deep rooted fat phobia. And the minute I got out of eating disorder treatment, I had weight loss surgery because I wasn't allowed to talk about this thing for a very long time. The minute I had some autonomy and was able to make my own choices, I chased the thin ideal. No one talked to me about my inner fat phobia and where it came from and what it might actually be driving me to do. I just was not allowed to talk about it. And then I made decisions based on that. I so wish that I had talked about it before I had that surgery. That's a huge piece of grief for me, is that no one talked about fat phobia before I had a permanent surgery. But it is what it is. I didn't know that until I knew better. And that was in, honestly, like 2020. It's a pretty recent realization for me, is that my own fat phobia was perpetuating my eating disorder for years beyond what I thought. So that initial part of RLC was honestly me entering real recovery, conquering my own fat phobia, learning about ableism, learning about eating disorders that I have never had or have never heard of, and expanding my understanding of recovery in general. I loved going through the RLC training. At this point in my life, we were living in El Salvador, waiting for our house in Texas to be built. And I just felt like I finally found my people who get me. These people know what I'm talking about. They see me as a person. They've had similar experiences to me. They believe my lived experience, and they aren't telling me recovery has to be this one black and white thing. And I just was thrilled with it. And at the same time, I was really questioning, what is a coach? Are coaches respected? Is this a real career? What do therapists think of coaches? Like, what is this? Can I do this? I don't know. I had been a teacher for 8 years. And so the idea that I would not be a teacher and instead like forge my own path was really scary to me. And so I took a lot of time to do some research and talk to therapists in my life to see, like, what do you think of eating disorder coaching? And there were some therapists in my life who I really, really respect. They're friends of my family. And I asked them, like, they knew me personally, they knew my history. And I told them about the course and said, like, what do you think about this? As a therapist, what do you think about an eating disorder recovery coach? Like, is that someone who's uncredentialed and coming for your job? Or like, is that someone you want to work with? Do you think there's a need for this? And overwhelmingly, they encouraged me to do it. What they said is that they don't have a ton of eating disorder experience. They are therapists who deal with trauma and childhood stuff and all these other things, but they don't have a big eating disorder focus, and they don't know how to help their clients. And so someone who can join the treatment team and help them, they were super open to it. And that was really encouraging to me, because these were professionals that I really respected, and I didn't want anyone to think that I was like trying to cheat my way into becoming a therapist. And like try to take their job or anything like that. I just needed to know that like this was a real thing that is respected and that is there's a need for it. And so once those people in my life kind of gave me the okay, I guess I could have given myself that okay, but I needed to hear from a therapist or someone else. I don't know, that maybe that's just me, but I needed that. That really gave me the motivation to get started in coaching and take it really seriously. Once I allowed myself to realize that that dream was something I wanted to pursue, it was really scary, but also so exciting and freeing. So let's pause for a second and talk about what recovery coaching is and what it is not. Recovery coaches are, in general, an incredible addition to a treatment team. They do not replace treatment in any way. All of the RLC coaches, of which I am a part of, only see clients who have a therapist and a dietitian on their team. We are not standalone treatment teams. Coaches are absolutely not in any capacity meant to be seeing clients who don't have a treatment team. Now, let's say we have someone who's interested in coaching and they don't have an established treatment team. We can help you find an established treatment team and get that established and get that going. But we're never going to see a client completely on our own without the help of a therapist, dietitian, doctors, things like that. So that takes a lot of the pressure off of me. I'm not stealing anyone's job. I'm just adding to the treatment team. I am just helping those people feel really seen and understood, and like their story is real and matters. Once you graduate from the RLC program, then you enter into something called supervision. So you graduate, you've done all the coursework, and you open your own business, you're ready to be a recovery coach. You're still not then released out into the world, into the wild, wild west, where coaches do whatever they want. With RLC, we are still really regulated on how we want things done. And that doesn't mean that we're rigid with our treatment team and our treatment plan, but we are very structured in how we provide coaching. We want to make sure that we're within our scope of practice. We don't want to step on anyone else's toes. If that's a therapy situation, we want to refer the client to the therapist. If it's a dietitian issue, we want to refer it to the dietitian. We want to stay in our own lane and do what we do best. And the way that we're able to make sure that that's happening is through supervision. Jane, who created RLC, runs supervision every week, and she hears our cases, gives us feedback, asks questions if it feels like maybe we're not quite getting to the right place with a client, and in general just keeps us all in check. A huge part of being an online entrepreneur, in my opinion, is having community, and supervision is another part of that, where it's other people who get you. They know what you're doing and you understand what they're doing, and we can all talk about the challenges that we're having. We can give each other ideas, feedback. It's a really supportive, lovely community, and we meet every single week. About a year ago, Jane asked me to step into a supervisory role, and so I now run supervision in tandem with her. So coaches will share their cases with me, and I will kind of relay that to Jane, and we'll have some chats between us, and then I'll relay back to the coaches. It's very, very similar, just looking a little bit different with me in a supervisory role than when I originally started. But supervision remains the same in that we're trying to make sure we're all within our scope of practice and staying in our own lane, doing what coaches do best and referring out when we need. As recovery coaches, we work closely with the therapist and the dietitian to make sure that all of our goals are aligned, that we're working on the same things or enhancing those same things in our messaging each week when we see our clients. Recovery coaches are also really good advocates for the client. Sometimes it's really overwhelming to manage your treatment team and to make sure that your therapist knows this and heard this thing from your dietitian. The dietitian share the information with the therapist. In some ways, a recovery coach can help be a coordinator for all of those different professionals and make sure that we're all on the same page. Another way that coaches come in handy is helping the client advocate for themselves. This is a huge thing that I wish I learned in my own recovery, was how to advocate for myself and have someone be on my side saying yeah, that sounds weird. Definitely talk to your doctor. Or yeah, that is kind of how it is. And you can still talk to your doctor, or whatever the advice is that I needed in that moment. I definitely didn't feel like I was allowed to question my doctors or my treatment team. I just kind of had to go along with it. And any sort of recovery coach can help explain things to the client that maybe the therapist or the dietitian think is already understood. But they can also say if that doesn't feel right for you, I want to be there to help you advocate for your therapist on why that doesn't feel good, or talk to the dietitian about why you don't like that recommendation. And that doesn't mean that the coach is there to go behind anyone's back. Kind of the opposite. We want to bring everything to light and help all parties communicate well with each other for the best of the client. While therapists work on things from the past, typically coaches work on things in the present day. So we are really good at helping you walk the walk of recovery in the current moment. Almost all of our coaches offer text support. So if you're in the middle of a tricky situation, maybe your mother-in-law said something about the way that you look and you're just feeling off and you're having some urges, text your recovery coach. You're not going to be able to text your dietitian or your therapist or your doctor typically, but you can text your recovery coach, and we are a person who gets it. We're going to say like, oh my gosh, unsolicited comments are never helpful. Here are some of the things that we talked about in session that are going to help you cope through difficult moments. Do you want to try any of these? What feels supportive to you? Like, we're going to help you in the moment with those difficult situations and help you walk the walk of recovery so that there's not so much time in between your appointments. Something that I really saw in my own recovery is that I would be what I described last week as being like very compliant all day long and then going home and binging. And that was for me because I had what they considered support all day long. And then I got home and I was like free to do whatever I wanted. If I had a coach back then, I would have been able to talk with them about, man, the nights are really hard for me. It's the only time I feel like I'm in charge of myself and I can make my own choices. And what I end up doing is binging every time. What can we do about that? And we could have worked on the nighttime specifically with a coach or with a therapist, or that could have been brought up to my treatment team as like, hey, this feels so rigid during the day that at night, the client feels like they need to break the rules. That would have been something that I wish I knew I could advocate for myself in treatment, and I definitely didn't. I just was silent about it and compliant during the day and then really struggling at night. So a coach can help with finding the holes in the treatment plan and then helping the client advocate for themselves or advocate to the treatment team on why we should maybe change that treatment plan. So eating disorder recovery coaches are an incredible, incredible addition to any eating disorder treatment team. I highly, highly recommend you look for one if you are in active recovery. If you have had your own recovery and you're looking to become an eating disorder recovery coach, I would love to chat with you more about that. Or if you're interested in taking the RLC course, you can check out recoverylovandcare.com. I think there's currently a wait list to join the next cohort of coaches, but it's great to learn more if that's something that you're interested in, or send me a DM. I'm happy to talk about what recovery coaches do. A lot of our eating disorder coaches also do body image coaching, and that's a little bit different, but still pretty similar. Body image coaching is really for anyone. You don't have to have a diagnosed eating disorder in order to qualify, and you don't need to have the exact same team in place, although we always recommend therapists on a treatment team. Body image coaching really helps you start to question those things that society teach you or that diet culture tries to teach you. So we might talk about the diet cycle, binge restrict cycle. We might talk about how your body image has nothing to do really with your actual body and more to do with the relationship with your body. There is almost no one that I know that wouldn't benefit from body image coaching. So if you're interested in working on some of these things, but you've never had a diagnosed eating disorder, coaching could still be right for you. Once a month, I'm going to bring a different eating disorder recovery coach on the podcast, and we're going to talk to them about their own recovery story, how they got into coaching, and what kind of coach they are, because all of us have our own unique interests, our own ed recovery story. For me, I'm really passionate about working with people who are recovering in a larger body because I recovered in a larger body, and it was really hard for me. I didn't feel seen. I didn't feel like I was allowed to talk about certain things. I didn't feel like the picture of an eating disorder. And I felt so, so alone. So I love working with clients who are in the similar path. We have coaches who like working with teenagers, coaches who work with moms, coaches who work postpartum, coaches who are really into healing your movement journey, all different types of coaches. So depending on what you're needing, you can find someone that is a good fit for you. And every month you can listen to different coaches talk about their own niche. So maybe you'll find the exact person for you. Next week, we're going to have another eating disorder recovery coach, Summer, come tell her own ED story, talk about what kind of coach she is, and hear more about coaching. So stay tuned for that. Thanks for being here for a short episode this week. If you missed last week, be sure to listen in so you're all caught up on my ed recovery story. And also you can hear my mom be incredibly brave and hear some really hard things, but it was a great conversation. So I highly recommend it. Thanks for being here, friends. Talk to you soon. Bye.